Good morning. So how's everybody so far today? Yeah? I've already been at the restaurant cooking all morning, so. Tell you a little bit about me. Me and the wife did just move here in January. I grew up outside of San Angelo, so I know West Texas. And moved to Fort Worth area back in '99 and started my culinary career then. So 24 years up there, and worked at high-end fine dining restaurants through the whole time, up all the way from Roanoke to South Fort Worth. And every place I've ever been at, we would build a garden on premises. The two restaurants that the main restaurants I did a lot with, we had higher.
A little louder, please.
Oh. Okay. The two restaurants that I did work at one restaurant was 20 and a half years, the other one was 3 years, but we built a garden on premises. Both restaurants had about a 5,000 square foot garden right next door to it that we planted, maintained, did the seasons with it, harvested, and then kind of put them all through the menu and stuff like that. So I'm big with hands-on, getting as much as I can local. I worked with quite a few ranches, quite a few farms, greenhouses, and everything around Fort Worth. That's what I'm trying to find around here now, and trying to expand that same scenario here. And then, like I said, in January, we moved here, and my sister is the owner of the Flippin' Egg. And what me and my wife, Melissa, bring to the table is, between both of us, we have over 50 years of restaurant industry, high-end catering, and low-end catering. So coming here, we took over the restaurant. I'm the GM/executive chef, and Melissa is my event coordinator. And Tammy still runs them, and we still are all three there all the time. But what we want to do is turn around and bring a catering option to Abilene. I know y'all do have catering, and it's mostly barbecue and stuff like that. I want to kind of expand y'all's imagination and give y'all a different kind of tier. So we're working on that. The catering part is called triple tier, but you can definitely, if anybody needs anything, reach out to us. We're going to talk today about herbs. I figured I'm pretty good at that because I've always have used them, and I've always grown them. But to branch out a little bit, the word herb came Latin from herba, which is grass, blades, stalks, and there's tons of varieties that you can do with the herbs. It's not just cooking like I do. There is a whole section that goes the medicinal side, and then you also have the aroma side of it. They've been using herbs in more, if you sit there and look back through history and everything, herbs was more of a medicinal part, and just started a couple of thousand years ago going into the culinary side. But they do have books and stuff like that dated all the way back that write about herbs and medicinal and stuff like that all the way back to 77 AD. They sit there and tell the components and the properties and everything of how to utilize certain portions for the body. Then, throw in a whole bunch more years later and everything, in Europe started sitting there playing around with herbs and coming across how you can use herbs to basically preserve fruits, vegetables, meats, and stuff like that. So they started doing that in Europe hundreds of years ago, and slowly it's been increasing and getting more and more into the culinary side through those years. And now I couldn't cook if I didn't have herbs. But going into our herbs, we had a class just a couple of days ago, and so I would say 3/4 of the class was kind of hit me on doing herbs and everything in pots more than in ground. So I went back and wrote a whole bunch more notes to incorporate that. I am learning a little bit about Abilene, y'all's soil, y'all's pH. Y'all are a little bit different than Fort Worth. I've found out that y'all have basically 2 soil types, sandy in the north, really, really hard clay in the south. Fort Worth, we had 7 different types of soil. So it was always tricky of what neighborhood you lived in, I guess. But y'all's pH is a little bit higher than Fort Worth. And y'all are, a lot less on the water rain scale that Fort Worth has. But that's not a bad thing with herbs. Herbs, they don't like really, really saturated soil. They don't like a swampy area. They like plenty of drainage. They don't really care for the clay, because when you saturate clay, when we have our nice little rains that come through springtime and the fall and stuff like that, when that clay gets saturated, it absorbs so much water. And when it does that, all your roots and anything that you have down in there, they just can't breathe. They don't have the oxygen that's getting to them and it's surviving what they need. They still get it from the leaves and stuff, but they also want that nice oxygen aerated at the root portion, or it will sit there and kind of drown itself, and it kind of stunts the growth of it. So doing them in the ground, anytime you're planting some kind of herbs and stuff like that, if you're on the north side, the sandy part's the good part. That's going to sit there and give you nice drainage. It's going to give you all the components that you need. You still want to mix in some nice compost, some things that are going to break down and give nutrition as it's breaking down for those roots as the growth season is carried. Now, south side, when you sit there and if you're planting in ground, your best scenario would be is if you're getting a 3-inch, 4-inch, 6-inch pot of an herb, don't dig that little section of soil. You also want to sit there and almost double what you're putting in. So if you're putting in a 4-inch pot, do an 8-inch hole. Because what you'll do is take that soil that you're taking out of that 8-inch hole, mix in some sand, mix in some compost. That way it will sit there and break up that clay. The clay is a good thing because it still will give you that moisture content. When you do water it, it's going to absorb and it's going to kind of hold that moisture. But you also want it to be able to drain and kind of dry out in between. So mix in some of your sand, your compost, mulch if you have to, just to sit there and break that clay up and kind of, so definitely try to double the size of the hole, even not just diameter, the depth also. Because if you think about it, when you plant, and as soon as you put that plant in there, those roots have been in that pot and they go to the side and they stop at the wall of that pot. And then they turn and they start going around. That's why a lot of times whenever you buy a vegetable or a plant or something like that and you pull it out, roots are going everywhere. It's because it's kind of getting to that point of it's root bound, because they're going and it's like us trying to run through this wall. We got to turn and go a different way. And that's what they're doing. But as soon as you put them in the ground or a bigger pot, those roots come back alive. And they're reaching. So if you have that nice loose soil that you've broken up and mixed into, and you have some nutrition there, it's going to wake them up. They're going to grow outward. Now, once they get to that outer clay, they're going to be hardy and strong enough that they can start penetrating that clay, but they're also still going to be surviving on the loose part that you put there. So you understand what I mean at first? So what it does, it will, it'll definitely double your plant's survival. And if it needs to, you got different plants that can stay in the more seasons. Your rosemaries, rosemaries, lavender, some of those will sit there and grow into multiple seasons if you maintain them through the winter. Some of your cilantros, parsleys, those are all shallow roots. They're a little bit trickier and a little bit more delicate. One thing to kind of think of when you're thinking of herbs and that you're going to start something new at the house and everything, first thing, think of what you and your family like. Think of the herbs that you cook with, the herbs that you buy and stuff like that. Work with those. If you want to experiment and pull in some new things, don't go, hardcore with it because you and your family might not like them. Plus, do some research because each kind of herb can expand and take over different things. The mint family is, they're kind of like creepers. They will take over a bed if you have it in your flower bed or something like that. So if everybody likes mint at the house a lot of times, so if you are planting it, try to sit there and plant it where you can definitely maintain it in an area, because the next year I can guarantee you're going to have it out in your grass. It's going to keep going down the flower bed. So make sure where you have it that that kind of family, the mint family, you can definitely maintain it and kind of keep it at bay sometimes. 3 reasons to grow herbs basically is, in my eyes, is they're the easiest plants to grow. They take not very much effort. They do take a little bit of time to get them started, a little bit of maintenance. You don't have to sit there and constantly water them. They like a good drying out in between waterings. We'll talk a little bit more of that here in a little bit when we get into the pot part. And then second, harvesting herbs. You can use them fresh. You can dry them out for longer months. You're going to get so much more flavor by growing your own herbs than the ones you buy at the grocery store that are in jars. Most people don't understand that the herbs that you see in the jars, they're probably 3-4 years old already. And they've been sealed up. They lose their oils once you start drying out herbs. That's the elixir that basically mixes into your dishes and everything. That is that natural oil, because it binds with either a solid or it'll bind to a water component in your dishes, and that's where it carries that flavor. Dry ones will, you can sit there and maintain with them. You're just cutting yourself short on that robust flavor that herbs can give you. Third, most of your herbs can sit there. You plant them, you start growing them, you harvest them, you prune them back, harvest. So you're continuous. It's not like something that, you're planting carrots or something out there, and then as soon as it's harvest time, you don't have anything there now. If you sit there and maintain and take care of them and put them in the right kind of scenario for them to thrive, you can continue through the whole growing season. Most herbs do really well until we get into a frost. Some herbs can kind of sustain a little bit. Rosemary's one that will, I've seen it completely iced over and then the next day still bloom. So, some of your other ones are nice and delicate. As soon as we start dropping into the 40s, you're going to start seeing that plant start dwindling back. There's basically 4 different, I would say, categories of herbs. You got the mint family that we talked about earlier. Those are more your Mediterranean kind of style plants. They thrive in that kind of Mediterranean, that high heat, moisture a little bit, and stuff like that, rocky conditions and everything. That's going to be more of your mint, your let's see, you got what all would be in there. I would say your shallow ones, they're not going to go very deep. Their roots are real small. They go down just a couple of inches. They're very vibrant in their flavor and their aroma. Your next one's the carrot family. Carrot family are going to be more of a taproot. Not as like a taproot as like a carrot, but they're just not going to be shallow roots. They'll go down cilantro, parsley, dill, fennel. All of those are kind of in your carrot family. You can also harvest your seeds and stuff like that very well. Next one would be the daisy plant family. Daisy, you automatically in your head, you think flowers. Well, that's true. Your chamomile, your marigolds, chrysanthemums, carnations, all of these that are edible. A lot of people don't understand that the flower itself and a lot of herbs are edible. In the culinary world, we use everything we can, all the way from the flowers, all the way sometimes down to the roots. But, herbs are just not just the leaves. Everybody always thinks you got leaves or seeds. You can actually use the stems in certain ways. You can also use the flowers in certain ways. They all have that nice aroma. Flowers have tons and tons of flavor. We would always sit there and go out whenever anything started flowering or bolting or anything like that. We would, what you want to do if you have like cilantro, parsley, anything like that that's bolting, which bolting is, you got this one stalk, it's starting to come up, it's a lot heavier, a lot broader than anything else of the plant, and then all of a sudden you got all these flowers. Well, that's the survival of the plant. So whenever you're sitting there looking at your herbs, cilantro, parsley, and things and everything, you got nice big leaves, and you're sitting there growing it, and then all of a sudden you have something bolt up, and it'll be sometimes 2-3 times taller than the plant itself. And like I said, it's going to be nice and dominant versus all the other little stems, and then all of a sudden it's going to have all these flowers coming out. And if you sit there and leave it long enough, you can sit there and watch all your bouquet, your parsley and your cilantro underneath it. Those leaves are actually going to start getting smaller. They start shrinking. And what it is it's its natural production. It's sitting there of, okay, we got to change now from collecting all this sun and building our roots and building our foundation. Now we're switching everything to propagation. We're going to sit here and make seeds for the next year. That's where the bloom comes in. So once it starts that stage, the bottom part kind of just shuts down. It won't just like dry up and go away. It's just going to start minimizing what it's doing, and it's going to focus everything on that main stalk to make those seeds. So if you have something that comes in bolts, it can be any herb. I mean, cilantro, parsley, basil, any of those will bolt on you and start seeding. If you want to sit there and it's early in the season and you still want, months of your growing, take a pair of scissors or a clean knife, go in there, go down as low as you can on that plant, cut that main stalk, just that bolt stalk, not all your other ones, because what it's doing is it's putting everything to it. So as soon as you cut that, it's going to revert and go back to your bouquet of everything else to kind of restart their clock. Because if you, like I said, if you leave it on there, all your production and everything is going to start focusing on the flowers, and then it's going to seed out. And then the rest of it, once it does that, basically the plant's like, okay, we don't got to grow no more. It'll just start dwindling all the way back. So, but you can turn around and use that stock, use the flowers. They will have some leaves on it. They're not going to be very big, but it's still got a lot of flavor there. So you can sit there and pull and harvest and do different things with the flowers and the small leaves. If you're making a stock or soups and stuff like that, you can definitely cut that stock up also and add to your dishes. Then, like I said, it's going to start that clock. Everything's going to come back. Your leaves will get bigger again. But, if you watch it, once like cilantro, and it's the worst. Cilantro bolts so fast. But you can cut one of the bolting stems off, and like 3 days, there's another one. You're going to be constantly going out there. But just keep cutting them back and slowly keep harvesting the rest of your stuff. Now, later in the fall, or the growing season, you're kind of done with, okay, I'm not going to utilize that anymore. Then you can turn around and let it bolt out, let it go to flowers, let it go to seed, let them start drying, and then you can harvest your seeds. Then you can use your seeds the next year, or you can turn around and use your seeds in the house. But, you have parsley seeds, you have coriander, you have fennel, dill. How I usually harvest is once those flowers bloom out and you can see that they're returning from a flower to a seed, you don't want to automatically harvest them there. They need to go through that full transformation. They need to sit there and develop all the way through, so they'll start drying. And a good way to do it is to kind of go out there every day or something like that fennel and dill's an easy one to kind of watch, even onions. But you'll have those little starbursts, and you'll see them slowly start to dry up. But then you'll have green ones everywhere and some dry ones. What you can do is grab one of the dry ones and just kind of shake it in your hand. If those seeds start falling out, it's ready to harvest. Then what I normally do is I'll come in and I'll just cut that little cluster off, put it in a Ziploc, harvest all my dry ones. I'll leave the Ziploc open and set it on the shelf. Every day I'll go out there and I'll just keep harvesting every little cluster. And then once I get it all harvested, I'll seal the Ziploc, shake it, all those seeds will come out, and then I'll pull all the husk out. Then you take those seeds and kind of spread them on a sheet pan or a little dish or something like that. Let them dry a little bit more. That way you're not just sealing them up in something, and you might have 10 out of 50 that are still got a little bit of moisture there. You don't want any kind of a mold to come in or anything like that. So you want to let them dry a little bit more. Then you can seal them up, use them in the kitchen, save them for the next year. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. If you're harvesting and you want to dry the plant, it's the same kind of scenario. But if say you have tons of basil, we're fixing to get a frost that's coming in this weekend, what we would do, we'd go out there, we'd cut the base of the basil plant, cut the huge stalk, but leave it all together. Turn it upside down. Easiest way is like we have here. You have all these little things hanging here. Find a garage, somewhere that is has some nice dry air. turn them upside down, tie a string or something like that on the stalk and let them hang upside down. Because if you lay them down on something, well, the only ones that are going to dry are the ones on the outside. The ones underneath that are all getting smashed, those are not going to dry. They're going to start decaying. Then they're going to start molding. So you want to turn it upside down. That way the airflow is everywhere. And the weight of the stalk will leave it outward and sit there and let it air dry. But if you lay it down, it'll collapse on itself. Then you sit there and let it hang a couple of weeks. You can kind of watch it and they'll stay all stuck to it. And then in a couple of weeks, you can take it down, get you on the table or a sheet pan or something like that, and then take those big stalks and just kind of start running your hand across them. You do that, those leaves are going to start falling off, but the twigs, the stalk will stay there. Once it does that, I'll let it dry again. Do another week or so just on there. Then I'll pick out all my big sticks or any twigs that are still left in there, and then I'll kind of just hand roll the dry. Then you can put it in something that's sealed, airtight, and stuff like that. The restaurants in my past, we would do our basil, and I would harvest probably every year 3 to 4 gallons of dry basil, which, it started out probably 5 truckloads, but, once you get it all broken down and all that stuff, but it would sustain us with our basil through the winter. We still ordered in fresh, but we utilized the dry in soups and stocks and all kinds of dishes. So, any questions so far? Yes, ma'am.
You said you can chop the stalks and use them in your soups and stews. Mm-hmm. Can you eat it or do you take it out?
You can eat them. They're going to sit there and break down. It's going to have a texture a little less than a celery, like if you're using like a parsley stalk or a cilantro and stuff like that, fennel and stuff like that. But yeah, it'll definitely, you could leave it in there and it's going to have a texture of a piece of celery. You could blend it into it, but it'll definitely continue that flavor profile, and you can utilize more of the plant. Yes, ma'am.
Are all the blooms from the herb edible?
Mm-hmm.
Any herb?
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's this summer. Play around when you're out walking and you have your herbs growing and stuff like that, and you see it bloom. Just pick off a bloom, pop it in your mouth. You might sit there and think of cilantro, basil, fennel, tarragon, anything like that. But as soon as you put that bloom in your mouth and just smash it with your teeth, it doubles in flavor than what the leaves were going to give you. What we would do, we would sit there and we would take the blooms sometimes and garnish the top of a protein, a fish or something like that. Or every once in a while we'd do some artisan salads and we would throw the blooms in there. So you're sitting there eating this nice kind of sweet artisan salad, and then every once in a while your teeth cracked into a bloom. And so it would just open up a new world, a bouquet. And so it just kind of, it's just a burst of love. Yes, ma'am.
You said there were 4 categories, and you mentioned 3.
The other one I haven't, it was the onion plant. Onion plant's going to be your chives. Let's see, you got tons of different chives, garlics. All of those are going to be in that onion family. But if you're turning around and going to, most people, like we talked about the other day, talked about doing container gardening than in-ground. So certain herbs will do really well individual, because if you put them with some of the other ones, they'll kind of choke out. Your mint family, that's a nice one to sit there and put an individual pot and set up on your patio or balcony. Some plants you can put together, chives, parsley, cilantro. You can sit there and kind of branch those together and make and look at herbs on your different colors, because just like you do arrangements on your front yard and stuff like that of your different pampas grasses and your different flowers and stuff like that, you can do the same thing with herbs. Because, I mean, you would have tons of different color categories. Basil's one, you got a nice dark green, you got a light green. You can even go a opal basil. Opal basil is a dark, almost black purple. It's the same kind of profile. The only thing is when you cook with the opal basil, it does have a tendency to kind of bloom out some of that color. So it can make some of your dishes a little off looking. We always use the opal basil fresh. We would sit there and do a tomato mozzarella salad or a watermelon salad, and then kind of do some chiffonade of the opal basil across it, just to kind of give you another color scheme. But you have tons of different flavors now of new ones coming in. Look at all the different sages. You got pineapple sage, your mints. You have chocolate mint. There's all kinds of different herbs that they're playing with the flavors. Now, the flavor profile does still come across. It's to me, it's more, I would say, a 50-50. It's more mentally. So if I'm sitting here handing you an herb and sitting there, it's like, okay, this is pineapple sage, you're automatically thinking pineapple as soon as I say pineapple. So it's sometimes works. You do get the characteristics of it and stuff like that. A lot of the herbs that you will see that are those ones that are enhanced that way, when you cook with them, you really lose that flavor. It's not a profile that sticks with it. The sage part will, but the pineapple you lose when you cook. It's a nice way to finish some dishes and stuff like that, and play around. But it's not like it's going to change the world in that direction. But talking about pots, you have terracotta. You can do cedar boxes, you can do steel tubs, steel pots. These are all wonderful containers for herbs, as long as you have the drain hose in the bottom. That's the biggest focus. Like I said earlier, herbs do not like saturated, sitting in water, anything like that. It will choke them out. They will dwindle over time. Try to find your vessels to plant in. Make sure there's no chemicals. They're nice and untreated. Especially on that one would be more of your wooden boxes, your cedar boxes and stuff like that. Try to get the natural ones, not the ones that, you just have to look at them and read. Some of them are treated for, to sit there and make them a little bit more weather resistant or bug resistant and stuff like that. Any kind of chemicals that is on that vessel that you're doing is going to transfer into the soil, which is going to transfer through the root into your plant that you're eating. So definitely try to focus on no chemicals around in that portion, unless you're the one that's controlling the chemical to help that plant, fertilizer. If you have an infestation of some kind of bugs or something, you're the one that's in control, not something that you don't know. If you're doing individual plants, you can sit there and definitely plant smaller 6-inch deep pots are really well with like your individual short stem or short root plants. If you're going and getting more into the taproot, the cilantro, the parsley, those roots will go a little bit deeper. So try to go more of a 10 or 12 deep, and to sit there and give plenty of room for that to go down. If not, like I said, it goes back to that same kind of root bound that we've talked about before. But on a taproot, it goes down and then it starts angling out, and it's just not going to perform what you need it to perform to benefit you. If you're doing multiple arrangements in a pot, you could definitely go to the bigger steel pots, or even the bigger terracottas and stuff like that. When you're arranging, just make sure you get enough growth, because if you sit there and do, a nice 22 inch pot about the size of this, you could definitely put in about 6 different herbs to make a really nice arrangement. Now, you can turn around. It doesn't have to be only herbs. You could sit there and put, some kind of ornamental grass coming up for some height and color, and then you have your parsleys, and then your sages and oreganos, all that stuff are a little lower, and you build your tiers and everything to sit there and broadcast something really nice on your patio. But you can sit there and put them together. It doesn't have to be just herbs where everything is just in that one pot. You can sit there and play around and bring in some other color, other heights and stuff like that. Just make sure what you're bringing in isn't, too big, and it's going to overpower or kind of push out or push to the side your herbs that you're wanting there also. Yes, ma'am.
How much do the plants leach from the plastic cup or something like that? Do they?
Most of the plastic, over time, yes, they could start breaking down, but it would be years.
So we reuse mineral tubs for the cows and horses.
Oh, okay, those.
So it's super hard plastic.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
You're probably fine there, because that it's more of a commercial industrial grade plastic, right there. So it's built and sealed to not break down and penetrate. So you'll be fine on that one. When you're doing the soil for your pots and everything, like we talked about earlier, you don't want a ton of the clay. You want some. So you're going to have a mixture of compost, topsoil, sand, a little bit of clay. That's going to be your mixture that you want to put in there. You could probably, in a pot and everything, you could go equal parts, as long as it's nice and mixed in. The clay will sit there, and it's going to absorb that moisture. It's going to hold that moisture instead of just letting it run on through. Always on containers, make sure you got drain holes in the bottom, but also make sure you put either some of the landscape mesh or something like that down in there, because you want the moisture to be able to go out, but you don't want it to sit there and take all your soil with it over time. So if you sit there and have containers, get you, I've even seen people, they'll put like a piece of cardboard, or they'll put newspapers and stuff like that. The only problem on that is they break down really quick. You get about one season on it, and that's about it. But I've seen people even use coffee filters and things like that. But over time, they break down. Your fabric mesh that you can get at the hardware stores and everything that you line under mulch and everything, those have quite a few seasons, and they'll last you, and you can reuse them even if you dump the next year, change the soil or whatever. You can reuse them, just clean them up. But it'll sit there and help hold in all of your soil. And then you're going to sit there, and when you're doing them at the house, look at your patio. Look which way. Plants love, or herbs love 2 to 6 hours of good sun. They don't have to have a lot, but they definitely need between 2 and 6 of a good, decent sun. Most herbs are a little bit more delicate. They don't like that high heat that we have here in the middle of the day. So try to sit there and figure out a spot. That's what's nice about herbs with containers. You can always kind of move them around through the year if you need to. But you have have some morning sun. You can have a little bit of day sun, but just, kind of regulate it. A good watering, I would say probably every maybe 4 days. You want the plant or the pot not to always stay wet. You want it to have a little bit where it goes into that dry zone. The reason that's doing, you're basically strengthening that plant. If you're constantly watering it, it is going to grow, it is going to develop and everything, but it's not going to get the strength to survive once we get to the higher heats and everything. It needs a little bit of punishment, a little bit. But you could always sit there, check it with your hand, check your soil. You don't want it rock hard and dry, but you just want it, a little drier season. Always check that. If it is damp and stuff, just wait another day, maybe 2 days. Just always sit there and just kind of maintain that. When harvesting your plants, you kind of harvest from the outside in. You can come in, cilantro, parsley, dill. You can kind of come in and do a really good cutting if you needed to. If you have, if you're like me and I have like 6 bundles of parsley growing and I need to make a chimichurri, I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut every one of them. And I'm going to cut them about 2 inches from the ground and take every bit of it. What it's going to do, as soon as I do that, it's going to sit there and go back into that rush mode to produce. So by the next day, it's already got little shoots coming up. It's already got little leaves coming in. Yes, it's going to be another, couple of weeks before it's back to where it was. But at your home and stuff like that, you probably won't come in there and need to make, a gallon of chimichurri sauce like I do. But you can sit there and trim from the outside in, or you can trim from one side to the other side. That's another good rule. Say this is your plant that's growing. You can start on this side, and then every couple of days, you're moving and harvesting. So by the time you get to this side's ready to harvest again. So it's just kind of a nice little wave that you can do on some of your herbs. You always want to keep them nice and clean around the bases. That's any kind of decay or anything falling down, that's going to sit there and bring in your bugs, your pests, and stuff like that. So if you have any dead stalks or leaves or anything kind of just falling down, just go ahead and clean them up. Keep it nice and clean. You can put mulch around it. That'll sit there and help maintain the moisture in there a little bit longer, especially when we get into the high summers. Move them around in your yard for the shade when we get to the high summers. Back in Fort Worth, we would always, if I needed to, once the heat started coming, we would put up solar shades and stuff like that. I'm learning around here y'all don't like solar shades, or y'all's wind doesn't like solar shades because it never stops blowing. But yeah, so we would sit there and kind of utilize that to and grow the garden for the shades to help us out once the high heat got here. I've done in-ground gardens. The one restaurant, like I said, it had a 5,000 square foot in-ground garden, and it was kind of like on the south side over here that y'all have. It was that dark, heavy clay. It's right up there at Tarrant County and Denton County line, and it's that black, really, really hard clay. So what we did is I measured off the spot we were going to put the garden, and then I brought it in a front-end loader and I took it down 14 inches. And basically built a raised bed, but in the ground. Then I brought in organic soil and then filled it in. And then every year I brought another truckload of organic soil and tilled it in. So what was nice about that is I utilized the clay because in the summer when we were watering, the water would go down, and as soon as it hit that bottom clay bed, it would stop draining. It would drain real slow. So it sat there, it kept feeding the roots. And so it just helped utilize the garden, because it was in, that garden there had full sun from 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And so there was a couple of times, like on the tomatoes and stuff like that we would use solar shades to kind of give them a little bit of a relief, so because we were just getting sunburned too bad. The second restaurant, the soil wasn't very good there either, but I was on an incline, so it had a little bit of a slope, so I really couldn't go in there and do the same scenario. And I really didn't want to plant in that, because that whole soil that we had there, when they reconstructed and widened 183 through Fort Worth, that was our trash pile. So I really didn't want anything growing there in that soil. So there we turned around and I built raised beds. We built them 22 inches tall. They were 12 by 6, and I put in 15. Then they were basically, we built them and they were 6 feet apart, and then we built arbors in between. So a lot of people you'll see like on their raised beds and everything say like, this is a corner of a raised bed, you'll build an arbor. Well, the only problem about building an arbor here is when you plant, you really can't plant in the middle, because anything you planted on your trellis and your arbor really blocks the sun and everything that you have in the center. So basically we had a bed and then another bed, so we built the arbors in the center, which kept the beds full and open. And when we needed to harvest, we walked down the middle and harvested. So we had cucumbers, cantaloupes, watermelons, squashes, gourds, anything that would climb, beans and stuff like that, anything that would climb, we planted on those and then harvested through the middle. I have planted, one time in the trellis, I even had 7-foot gourds and that were edible at 4 foot. Anything over 4 foot, they're not edible. But we would make kind of a couple of different dishes and stuff. So I like pulling in really unique stuff. Everybody keeps asking me, come in here. It's like, oh, you're going to put a garden over there at the Flippin' Egg? I'm surrounded by concrete. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But I don't even know if raised bed. Because it's, that's another thing, with so much concrete. Even going back to your pots that we were talking about, you get so much radiant heat from your concrete. So even though your pots are sitting on your concrete, you got to remember that and think about that, because even if it's over here in the shade, but this part of the concrete is in full sun, it's going to continue carrying that heat. So what it does is, the concrete heats up the bottom of that terracotta or anything like that. It cooks your roots. That's why if that bottom is hot, it will sit there and cook the roots, but they're just not going to develop. They're going to stunt themselves. A good place, up at one of the gardens that we had up there, I would take a laser every once in a while and go out in the middle of the summer and just measure the ground temperature. Yes, Texas is hot. Everybody's like, oh, it's so hot and everything, especially people out of state. It's funny. But I could walk out there in the garden. Your soil radiates so much more heat, though. But I could walk through the garden and check the soil, and it wouldn't be no problem. Just the top of the soil with the laser, 165. But underneath, using those solar shades would drop at 30, 35 degrees. Just having a solar shade. So even though, it's still surviving, but it just keeps those roots just a little bit down and everything. So definitely utilize your patio, your shade, a section of the house to sit there and maintain. If you're doing in ground, same thing. Try to figure out, where the high heat is going to be in the summertime. Think of that because, yes, it will survive, but it's not going to be to the potential that you're going to want it to be. Because, that's the main purpose of you putting all your effort into it and planning is for you. And you don't want to sit there and go ahead and cut it short by just having that high heat come in and just cook you. So always think of where you're going to put them and really look at, y'all know y'all's yards and everything. Think of that. Your soil. Think of what you want to utilize at the house and the plant or to give neighbors. I would definitely get one going, and you'll have plenty to sustain you, but it does take a little bit of thinking the beginning of it to get it down to a science for yourself. The master gardeners can help you, but you know your place, you know what you like. So definitely use those categories first before you start going into it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, no problem. Thank y'all for letting me come up here.